Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into the compelling, often tragic, and utterly captivating world of Ludwig II of Bavaria.
Ah, yes, the fairy tale king.
Exactly, or the Swan King, even.
Yeah.
It's a title that just perfectly captures his ethereal, almost otherworldly presence, don't you think?
It really does. It sets the scene perfectly.
Imagine this. A shy, intensely introverted prince, a soul deeply steeped in poetry and music, suddenly thrust onto a throne he never truly wanted.
It's got all the makings of a grand opera right there.
Absolutely. And it's a story that's about to reveal some truly profound insights, especially about longing and identity.
Indeed. We're going to explore how Ludwig's deep, often unrequited yearning for love wasn't merely a personal struggle. It was actually a powerful driving force in his life.
More than just feelings.
Oh, much more.
Yeah.
He channeled this profound longing into creating some of the most fantastical architectural wonders the world has ever seen. And then there's his relationship with Richard Wagner.
Right. Passionate, almost obsessive, you could say.
Definitely leaning towards obsessive at times. Our mission today is really to unpack the intricate layers of his life, using the sources you've provided to pull out the important nuggets of knowledge.
And the central theme we'll be exploring in this deep dive, I think, is perfectly captured by this phrase. He couldn't love in daylight, so he built a kingdom of moonlight and mirrors.
That's beautifully put. It really gets to the heart of it.
We're going to try and uncover crucial insights about Ludwig's secret longings, his queer identity, which is a big part of this story, and exactly how he projected his inner world onto those magnificent castles and that intense fixation on Wagner.
And to guide us through this complex narrative, we've drawn from a pretty rich tapestry of sources. We've got excerpts from a historical narrative that kind of lays out his life like a play,
Okay.
alongside detailed analysis of his personal letters and diaries, which are incredibly revealing.
Those must be fascinating.
They really are. We've also got perspectives from, standard historical biographies, but also, crucially, modern reinterpretations, especially looking through the lens of queer history.
That's right. And these sources aren't just recounting facts, are they? They let us view Ludwig's life with a more contemporary understanding.
Exactly. They reveal insights that his own contemporaries often missed or misunderstood.
Or maybe even deliberately suppressed.
Quite possibly, yes. Deliberately suppressed. So it's time to shed some light on a king who was, in many ways, really ahead of his time, and whose struggles, for self-expression, they still resonate quite deeply today.
Okay, so let's begin at the very beginning. Historical accounts often talk about him as the Lonely Swan Prince.
A fitting title.
Born Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm in 1845. He was, far from your typical future monarch, wasn't he?
Not at all. An introverted Bavarian prince, characterized by this profoundly poetic soul. Even from a young age, he showed an unusual sensitivity, a deep inner life that really set him apart.
And those early eccentricities?
Oh, they were quite notable, dressing up in historical costume, lots of solitary play acting.
Lost in his own world.
Pretty much. And this intense, almost singular obsession with art and music, this wasn't just a casual pastime for him. No, it was clearly fundamental to his developing identity, a refuge, really, from the rigid expectations of his royal upbringing.
And then at just 15, he has this experience that sounds, truly profound, life-altering even. He hears Richard Wagner's opera Lohengrin for the first time.
Ah, Lohengrin, yes. Biographical accounts describe it as this moment of just profound artistic and personal identification, a real musical revelation for him.
It resonated that deeply.
It absolutely did. Wagner's romantic Germanic legends, especially Lohengrin with its mythical swan knight savior, it spoke directly to what one source calls Ludwig's secret heart.
His secret heart.
Yeah, in that rigid royal world where he already felt different, isolated, this opera gave him this powerful glimpse of an inner truth he couldn't maybe fully articulate yet.
So a really foundational moment.
Absolutely foundational. It connected with a part of him that felt unseen, unacknowledged by everyone else.
So let's fast forward just a few years. He's remarkably young, only 18, and bam, he unexpectedly ascends to the throne. King Ludwig II of Bavaria.
Imagine that transition. A shy dreamer suddenly handed this role of immense power, immense expectation that he never really sought out.
He was apparently tall, handsome.
Very handsome, yes, but painfully shy, completely ill at ease with the whole world of court politics, and especially all the heteronormative expectations placed on a monarch back then.
And this is where that inner conflict starts to show, right?
Yeah.
Historical accounts say he just felt no romantic attraction to the women he was supposed to be courting.
None at all. Instead, he found himself drawn to close male friends, a preference that would, profoundly shape his entire life and his reign.
Which brings us to a really pivotal relationship early on. Prince Paul von Thurn and Taxis.
Paul, yes, his closest companion. And what many historical interpretations strongly suggest was likely his first profound emotional and romantic connection.
More than just friends.
The sources strongly imply it. They form this incredibly close bond. Hours spent riding horses, sharing poetry, and of course,
Wagner.
always Wagner, nurturing their shared, fervent admiration for his operas.
Their connection seems really deep. There's that anecdote.
The Lohengrin Serenade? Oh, yes. For Ludwig's 20th birthday, Paul literally dressed up as the Swan Knight Lohengrin, full armor, an artificial swan boat, and then serenaded the king under the night sky. I mean, this was far more than just a friendly gesture. It was grand, theatrical, almost like a private performance of their shared fantasy, just loaded with meaning for both of them.
So this gets to one of our key questions for this deep dive. Was Ludwig ever actually in a real romantic relationship, especially early on?
It's a central question. And if we look at the private letters between Ludwig and Paul, the language used, it goes way beyond typical 19th century formality or even just intense friendship. Well, Paul openly wrote about the beautiful hours they spent together, making him the happiest man on earth. He even declared, "Oh, Ludwig, I am devoted to you."
It sounds pretty intense.
It is. And historical sources consistently point this out. This is the language of deep, secret romance, not just friendship. It indicates a deeper, intimate connection that really defied the public expectations of their time.
And for Ludwig, navigating this must have been
Exhilarating and terrifying, I imagine. Here he is, a young Catholic prince, acutely aware that his true feelings were strictly forbidden by royal protocol, condemned by society.
He wanted that fairy tale love he read about, didn't he?
Desperately, like in the operas and legends he loved. And maybe in Paul's company and through Wagner's music they shared, he glimpsed a world where he could possibly be himself.
A world away from the stifling court life.
Exactly. A world far from the stuffy protocol he found so difficult. This early experience, it really set the stage for his lifelong search for a love that could exist outside those rigid boundaries. It cemented this pattern of seeking solace, seeking connection in private, hidden spaces.
Okay, so if that was Act 1, Act 2 really kicks off when he becomes king in 1864. And his first move...
It's quite something. Historical accounts describe it vividly. His very first act as king summoned Richard Wagner to his court in Munich.
Just like that, an 18-year-old king summons his idol.
An awkward, deeply introverted 18-year-old suddenly becoming the patron to this composer many saw as, frankly, scandalous. Ludwig became Wagner's most ardent, most generous benefactor.
How generous are we talking?
Immediately paid off all of Wagner's massive debts, set him up in a luxurious rent-free house, funded incredibly extravagant opera productions, sparing absolutely no expense. Sometimes the king would be the sole audience member, sitting there in private performances, maybe in the middle of the night, just completely enthralled. For Ludwig, it must have felt like a dream made real. His inner world meeting this grand artistic vision he adored.
And Wagner's reaction.
Well, Wagner, ever the opportunist, the master of self-promotion, he lavished effusive flattery on his young king. They exchanged hundreds of letters.
And the letters themselves.
Historical sources say they were brimming with over-the-top affection. Wagner cooing things like, "I'm in your angelic arms," and Ludwig replying with equal intensity, "My adored one, for whom alone I live, with whom I die."
That's intense.
It really is. The depth of it speaks to a profound, almost overwhelming infatuation on Ludwig's part.
Which brings us to another focus point. Obsession versus love. Was this fixation on Wagner maybe a stand-in for the intimacy Ludwig really craved?
That's a key interpretation. Modern historians largely agree Ludwig was almost certainly a gay man, and his profound emotional feelings for Wagner were real, going beyond just artistic admiration.
But he was smitten with the man too.
It seems very likely. Smitten not just with the art, but quite possibly with Wagner himself. He wrote despairingly that he cannot bear to live apart from Wagner, that he suffers terribly when they were separated. He insisted this is no passing youthful infatuation.
He really saw Wagner as that fairy tale love embodied, didn't he? An ideal beyond the mundane.
It seems so. He even had this ultimate rebellious fantasy, abdicating the throne. just running off to live a secluded life devoted entirely to Wagner and his music somewhere else.
That would have been scandalous.
Beyond scandalous for a king back then. Bound by duty, by those rigid heteronormative rules, his advisors must have been horrified. It threatened the stability of the monarchy itself.
And Wagner's response to this idea?
Wagner, well, he was heterosexual and, let's be honest, quite pragmatic about his finances. He gently but firmly talked Ludwig out of abandoning the crown.
Didn't want to lose his patron.
Exactly. Or have a Cluny ex-king complicating his already messy personal life.
Still, even with Wagner dissuading him, their relationship sounds like it was full of drama.
Oh, definitely. Despite the initial euphoria, Wagner, decades older, notoriously manipulative, he certainly played along with Ludwig's adoration when it suited him. Financially, artistically.
It paid off for Wagner.
Handsomely. Ludwig bankrolled the premieres of Tristan und Isolde, other major works. But court gossip, political resentment against Wagner's influence, it all built up. Wagner was forced to leave Munich in late 1865.
And Ludwig?
Heartbroken, furious at his ministers for exiling his idol. They remained friends, correspondents for life. But that intense honeymoon phase was over.
And then Wagner got involved with Cosima.
Yes, Cosima von Bülow, Franz Liszt's daughter. Wagner soon formed a relationship with her, eventually married her. This caused Ludwig significant jealousy, distress.
Did Ludwig understand what was happening?
Perhaps not fully, or he was in denial. He wrote to Cosima, quite naively it seems, saying he cannot live apart from him, Wagner, much longer, seemingly not grasping the depth of their involvement. It was a painful realization for Ludwig, a deep personal disappointment highlighting that gap between his idealized love and complex reality.
So, rejected in that romantic sense, but still devoted.
Absolutely. Still devoted to the man, the art. He channeled that yearning into grand projects for Wagner's glory, like funding the Bayreuth Festival Theater, meant to be this magnificent temple just for Wagner's operas.
Well, Wagner had moved on, personally.
He had, focused on his own family, his career. Ludwig eventually had to face that his profound devotion wasn't fully reciprocated in the way he longed for. He was, perhaps, Wagner's patron, maybe even a muse, but not his romantic partner.
That must have left him feeling incredibly isolated.
Emotionally stranded, is how one source puts it. A king in a gilded cage, broken-hearted, still craving that deep romantic love that felt constantly just out of reach. This unfulfilled longing, this void. It really became a central driver for his later architectural projects. He needed to create a world where his desires could finally find some expression.
Which brings us to another really pivotal moment, the pressure to marry. The royal duty aspect.
Immense pressure, which led to his engagement in 1867 to Duchess Sophie. She was Empress Sisi of Austria's sister, his cousin.
They were friends, weren't they? Shared a love for Wagner.
They did. On the surface, it seems like a good match, politically and personally. But historical accounts are very clear. Ludwig struggled profoundly with the whole idea of marriage.
The heteronormative expectation again.
Exactly. As the wedding date got closer, he experienced what we'd now probably call massive, paralyzing panic. He kept postponing the wedding.
Until he just couldn't do it.
Right. He abruptly called the whole thing off, left Sophie stunned, humiliated.
Did he explain why?
Remarkably, yes. In a very candid letter, he said the marriage was forced on him, that he loved Sophie like a sister, but he simply couldn't go through with it. Astonishing honesty for a monarch back then.
Sophie must have been devastated.
She was. And Ludwig retreated into intense guilt, confusion. It just cemented his isolation even further.
This really highlights that inner turmoil, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A deeply closeted Catholic king in the 1860s, torn between duty, church, state, and the undeniable fact of his own nature, his true affections. His private diary from 1869 reveals the spiritual torment he felt over his homosexual desires, forbidden love.
A deep conflict.
Between his faith, his duty, his identity. It was agonizing.
And this leads to another key point for us. Ludwig's fear of physicality. That tension between longing for connection and maybe an aversion to actual sexual contact.
Yes, his diaries really show that oscillation. Moments of what he saw as indulgence, followed by fits of profound remorse, praying for divine help to stay celibate.
Fighting against himself.
Constantly, a deep, agonizing internal conflict. And this struggle, you can see how it just wreaked havoc on his mental and emotional health.
But amidst all this turmoil, someone new enters the picture.
A bright spot emerges, yes. Richard Hornig, a handsome Prussian stableman, 5 years older than Ludwig.
And he appears right when Ludwig cancels the engagement.
Exactly. The summer, he called it off. Perfect timing for the king, you could say. Hornig was described as blonde, blue-eyed, skilled with horses, just the type for the horse-obsessed Ludwig.
So he starts as a groom.
But quickly becomes much more. Promoted to chief equerry, constantly by the king's side. They take these romantic moonlit sleigh rides together, escape to remote alpine cabins where Ludwig could actually relax, drop the royal facade.
A confidant.
Absolutely. Hornig became Ludwig's private confidant, his companion, someone who offered understanding, a sense of safety he rarely found elsewhere.
And Ludwig's feelings for him.
Very strong. In his diary, he calls Hornig the beloved of my soul. He gifted him a lakeside property, a significant token of affection. Contemporaries whisper that Hornig was basically the king's morganatic wife.
Implying a very deep, unofficial, but committed bond.
Exactly. Like a spouse, but without the official rank or inheritance rights. Hornig's obvious influence caused a lot of talk, a lot of jealousy at court.
And for Ludwig, this relationship must have clarified things.
Crucially, yes. Historical analyses suggest loving Hornig confirmed what Ludwig likely already knew. A conventional marriage to a woman was just not going to happen for him. He'd tasted genuine companionship, intimacy with a man. He couldn't get that with a princess, and he wasn't going to pretend anymore.
So Hornig became his emotional rock.
With Wagner now a more distant figure, yes. Hornig became his steadfast emotional rock for nearly 20 years.
So by his late 20s, Ludwig is living this profound double life.
Absolutely. Outwardly, he's the unmarried, eccentric monarch, this mysterious private figure, but secretly, behind palace doors, he's a gay man finding love and intimacy.
Was homosexuality actually illegal in Bavaria then?
Interestingly, no. The old sodomy law had been repealed back in 1813, but socially, it was profoundly taboo. Something whispered about, scandalous, requiring extreme discretion.
So Ludwig knew he had to be careful.
Paramount. He never flaunted these relationships publicly. But within the privacy of his castles, surrounded by loyal, attractive men, the facade could slip. This was his chosen circle, his community, in an age offering no open acceptance.
But the need for secrecy must have taken a toll.
Deeply. It fueled his growing disillusionment with public life, its relentless demands. More and more, Ludwig just withdrew from royal duties, turning inward.
Towards that world of make-believe.
Exactly. A world where his desires weren't judged. As one historian noted, his withdrawal from public life, perhaps in part due to the impossibility of living openly as a gay man, led directly to allegations that he was mad.
The stage was set for a clash.
An unavoidable confrontation between Ludwig's inner truth and a society simply not ready for it.
And what a confrontation. Because with his personal life pushed underground, his public duties neglected, Ludwig found this truly extraordinary outlet.
He poured his soul, his fortune, everything into creating physical spaces where he could finally live authentically, on his own terms, the result. Those 3 iconic, magnificent castles.
Starting around 1869.
Yes. He starts building his holy trinity of fantasy palaces. Neuschwanstein, that soaring faux medieval dream castle in the Alps.
Instantly recognizable.
Then Linderhof, an exquisite Rococo French-style pleasure villa. And Herrenchiemsee, his lavish, though never finished, replica of Versailles on an island.
And these weren't just normal royal homes.
Not at all. Historical sources emphasize they were essentially immersive theater sets, built for one man's imagination, designed not for governing, but for the king to enact his deepest fantasies.
Performance spaces, almost.
Exactly.
Really?
Where he could be both director and star of his own fantasy life. He worked incredibly closely with designers, architects. Some had even worked on Wagner's stage productions.
Crafting every detail.
Every single detail. The swan motifs everywhere, a clear nod to Lohengrin, artificial grottos, secret tunnels. Everything reflected his favorite operatic, romantic, mythological themes.
He was building his ultimate sanctuary.
A private wonderland, far from prying eyes. Which brings us to that crucial focus point. The castle as a closet and sanctuary. Why pour so much into these fantasy worlds?
To retreat into his queerness.
That's how modern interpretations see it, yes. To create a physical retreat for his queer identity and desires. These castles were never meant for the public.
They were his private escapes.
His literal closet built around himself, as some historians suggest. A protected space for self-expression. Contemporary historians openly call these queer spaces, designed specifically to isolate himself from judgment so he could, quote, aspire to pursue his same-sex desires in peace.
And Neuschwanstein is the ultimate example.
The crown jewel. Its fairy tale towers, the plush interiors. Yes, it's a love letter to Wagner, filled with murals of swan knights and tragic lovers from the operas. But profoundly, it also symbolized Ludwig's own secret longings, his quest for idealized love.
A scholar described it how?
As a fantastical interpretation of Ludwig's most intimate dreams and queer desires, never intended for the public access that is now essential to its preservation.
So it's deeply personal, deeply intimate, reflecting his identity, even if he couldn't say it openly then.
Exactly. And the irony is just incredible, isn't it? The castle he built to hide from the world becomes this global icon, inspiring Disney's Sleeping Beauty castle, a private sanctuary turned into a landmark.
Inside these places, though, he could be more himself.
He could let his true self flourish, yes, in subtle 19th century ways. By night, he completely ignored rigid court etiquette. No formal banquets. Instead, cozy midnight dinners, intimate gatherings, often in loungewear with trusted servants and friends.
Late night theater.
Scheduled entertainments at odd hours, lit by moonlight or elaborate stage lighting just for him. And at Linderhof, that famous Venus grotto.
The artificial cave.
Inspired by Wagner, yes. An artificial lake, cutting-edge electric lights. He'd sail in a golden swan boat, Wagnerian music playing, literally immersing himself in a scene from his favorite opera. A private performance just for him.
And those nocturnal gatherings became legendary.
Whispered legends, yes. The king inviting only the most attractive young men, stable boys, grooms, local soldiers for elaborate after-hours picnics, costume balls.
Picture the scene.
Ludwig in lavish oriental silks, guests in Turkish-style outfits, lounging on cushions, champagne flowing, thousands of candles.
And the mood?
Apparently grew more intimate, unrestrained. Handsome young men encouraged or maybe directed to strip down, dance for the king. Historical accounts paint this vivid picture. Opulent private revelry, royal grandeur meeting intimate indulgence.
A world away from daylight reality.
For a few hours, he could forget the outside world, indulge in pleasures denied him elsewhere. Here, he wasn't mad King Ludwig. He was just a man enjoying the company of other men, free from those constraints.
Was he predatory in these situations?
Historical accounts suggest not. He was gentle, if eccentric. The participants were willing, often very willing, enticed by royal favor, the prestige. Ludwig actually formed genuine emotional attachments to several companions over the years.
Beyond Hornig.
Yes. Hornig remained loyal, but Ludwig had a succession of male favorites, treated them much like other kings treated mistresses or favorites.
Like Joseph Kynes, the actor.
Ah, Kynes. Yes, a charismatic Hungarian actor Ludwig became profoundly infatuated with around 1881, captivated by his stage presence. During one show, he sent Kynes jeweled opera glasses mid-performance.
The clear sign of favor.
Definitely. Then he lavished Kynes with a luxury trip to Switzerland, expensive gifts, even posed for that photo together, Kynes seated, Ludwig standing, a huge breach of protocol signaling a favored companion.
Did that relationship last?
Like many whirlwind romances, it fizzled fairly quickly. Ludwig found Kynes less enchanting off stage. There was also Alphonse Weber, a young courtier often mentioned alongside Kynes.
But the specifics of physical relationships are murky.
They are lost to time, as our sources say. The royal family deliberately destroyed a lot of private papers, diaries, specifically to obscure the truth about his relationships, especially with men.
But reading between the lines,
it's pretty clear Ludwig formed numerous discreet relationships. Servants later testified to his weakness for muscular country lads, a polite euphemism for his preference and his pursuit of companionship.
so while Ludwig's reveling in his private wonderland,
The real world keeps knocking at the castle gates. Remember, Bavaria was absorbed into the new German Empire in 1871. Ludwig was left as a king without much real power, a figurehead.
and he wasn't interested in playing that role.
Disillusioned, preferring architects and actors to ministers, he increasingly skipped cabinet meetings, ignored state business. He was effectively disengaged from his government.
Becoming a nocturnal phantom.
Exactly. Sleeping by day, roaming his illuminated halls by night. His ministers grew incredibly frustrated. This wasn't sustainable.
And the rumors started madness.
Fueled by his extravagant spending on castles, these bizarre anecdotal leaks from inside, like the midnight parties. From a modern view, Ludwig might have been neurodivergent anxiety, depression, maybe even auditory hallucinations later on. But mad was also clearly weaponized.
Used to tarnish him.
And justify removing him. Which brings us to that focus point, the loneliness and power. How his queer isolation manifested in paranoia, withdrawal, and this myth-making around his sanity.
His secret queer life gave enemies ammunition.
Easy ammunition. Any behavior outside the norm could be twisted into evidence of insanity. A convenient way to discredit him.
And the money problem was real.
Yes, he was deep in debt from building. Spent his fortune, and then some, pushed the Bavarian state towards financial embarrassment. His ministers worried he'd drag Bavaria into bankruptcy, chaos.
So his private paradise looked like an asylum to them.
Less grand vision, more asylum of a madman. The scene was absolutely set for tragedy.
By 1886, the government decides enough is enough.
A cabal of his top ministers' relatives, they conspire to stage this meticulously orchestrated political coup. The plan: declare him legally insane, remove him, install a regent.
And the process they used.
Deeply flawed. Controversial even then. They compiled this dossier of allegations but didn't bother with a proper medical evaluation. They coerced Dr. Bernhard von Guden, a prominent psychiatrist,
to sign an insanity report without even examining Ludwig.
Exactly, without ever examining him in person. And 3 of the 4 doctors who signed it had never even met the king. It was a complete travesty of medical ethics, legal procedure.
What did the report say?
His eccentric habits, alleged delusions, yes. But tellingly, it also spilled juicy details from his private life as proof of derangement, like ordering young groomsmen to strip and dance.
Scandalous maybe, but not insanity.
Precisely, as historical analysis puts it. Poor taste by Victorian standards, certainly. But insanity, which gets to that critical point. Did he die for being queer, eccentric, or just inconvenient? How much did his sexuality make him a liability?
What's the consensus?
Unequivocally, underlying it all was this profound moral panic. His nonconformity, linked to his queerness, made him fundamentally unfit to rule in their eyes.
He wasn't violent or tyrannical?
No. His crime, as one commentator puts it beautifully, was living in a fantasy and loving in ways society frowned upon. His real offense was his unconventional nature, intertwined with his hidden life and those impossible expectations.
So June 12th, 1886. The coup happens.
The government commission arrives at Neuschwanstein. Ludwig, sensing betrayal, flies into a desperate fury. For a moment, it looks like a real standoff. He barricades himself in his bedroom. Loyalists talk resistance.
But he doesn't resist with violence.
Ultimately, no. His loyal companion Hornig and others persuade him not to. He surrenders, sadly, allows himself to be taken into custody, moved to Schlossberg, a smaller castle on Lake Starnberg, under Dr. Guden's care.
Or guard.
More like guard, yes. Bavaria's beloved unconventional king was officially deposed.
And what happens next is the great mystery.
One of history's great unsolved mysteries, an enigmatic end. On the evening of June 13th, 1886, Ludwig asks Dr. Guden to join him for a stroll by the lake. Fresh air, rainy, gloomy dusk, they set off.
And don't come back.
Never returned. Hours later, their bodies are found floating in the shallow water near the shore.
The official story.
Hurriedly announced, suicide. The 40-year-old king ground himself in despair. Guden died trying to save him. But this narrative was immediately problematic, widely doubted. Well, Ludwig was a strong swimmer. The water was only waist deep. And crucially, the autopsy reportedly found no water in his lungs, suggesting he probably didn't drown.
And Dr. Guden.
His body showed clear blows to the head, signs of strangulation, indicating a violent struggle occurred. The scene screamed foul play.
So what are the theories?
Did Ludwig attack Guden trying to escape, only to be shot or subdued by hidden guards? Did someone murder the king to silence him permanently? Or maybe a heart attack after overpowering Guden, collapsing from stress?
Could anyone say murder back then?
Not openly. Too politically dangerous. But few believed the neat suicide story. Conspiracy theories bloomed. Government agents ordered to eliminate him if he fled. A scuffle, a gunshot, a cover-up, or even a Leidstad, a Wagnerian love death.
And the royal family stance.
Official silence to this day. They famously refused a modern autopsy that might reveal, say, bullet wounds. But one thing is clear. The fairy tale king died under tragic, shadowy circumstances, just as he lived in enigma.
He wanted to remain a mystery.
An eternal mystery to himself and others, as he put it. He succeeded tragically.
How did the public react to his death?
Deeply affected. When the news hit Munich, people were shocked. Despite everything, they genuinely loved their shy dreamer king. He was a romantic figure, a symbol of Bavarian identity, spirit.
There was real mourning.
Huge funeral cortege. Thousands wept openly in the streets, mourning a figure who, despite flaws, had captured their hearts.
And Empress Sisi, his cousin.
Elizabeth voiced what many felt. She said, "The king was not mad. He was just an eccentric living in a world of dreams. They might have treated him more gently and thus perhaps spared him so terrible an end."
It underlines that his real crime was just dreaming instead of conforming.
Daring to live outside the narrow box of royal behavior. And for a gay man in the 19th century, living for beauty and love on his own terms was itself a profoundly revolutionary act. His end highlights the immense pressure, the dangers for those who defied rigid norms, especially around identity and love.
So, as we reach the epilogue, Ludwig's life really is like an opera. Passion, melancholy, spectacle, and its resonance has only grown.
It has. For decades after his death, people tried to sanitize his story. Just the mad king, the tragic hermit, conveniently obscuring the truth of his relationships, his identity.
But modern views have reclaimed him.
Courageously reclaimed him as a queer icon, seen now as a visionary dreamer, hopelessly out of time, or maybe far ahead of it. Today, we can see what contemporaries couldn't openly admit. Ludwig was a gay man, crushed between 19th century norms and his own vivid spirit. His struggle really mirrors the universal queer experience of navigating society.
He had to build that secret world.
Create a secret world to love and be himself, because the real world offered no safe harbor for his authentic identity. Which brings us to that powerful modern parallel, how contemporary queer individuals still build fantasy worlds to cope.
Gaming, fan fiction, safe spaces, online and offline.
Exactly. Ludwig just did it IRL with actual castles. You recognize so much in his story today. The sensitive kid burdened by expectations, the young romantic seeking connection, the unique person building a sanctuary when the world says no.
If I can't live my truth in this world, I'll build a new world where I can.
And he absolutely did, in stone and splendor. It's inspiring, but also heartbreaking, that his most authentic times were in these make-believe realms because reality was too hostile.
His castles are records of that fantasy world.
Powerful records built as a refuge, and his downfall reminds us how often society labels queer expression as insanity, perversion, punishing difference.
His deposition and death seem like the ultimate repression through that queer lens.
A vibrant, nonconformist king taken down by a rigid power structure that couldn't tolerate his difference. One scholar noted his inability to live openly directly contributed to the withdrawal that let enemies brand him insane. The closet made him an easy target.
And yet his legacy blossomed.
In freedom in ways he couldn't imagine. Those castles, once hidden, now celebrate him. Millions visit, including queer people from everywhere, marveling at the beauty, the story. The Mad King is now the beloved fairy tale king, the Kini.
A patron saint of the misunderstood for the queer community.
In a way, yes. A king who lived authentically, grandly, if covertly. Suffered for it, but left behind art, beauty that enriches us. We admire someone who, despite pressure, lived his truth, even hidden under eccentricity.
It makes you question what madness really is.
Exactly. Is it Ludwig's midnight gatherings? Or the society forcing him to such extremes of secrecy, isolation? He wanted to be an enigma, but looking back, it's not so opaque. A queer romantic, born too early, trying to make life art just to survive.
His tragedy was almost exceeding.
Creating a fantasy so grand it outlived him. But reality, prejudice, pierced that bubble. His death in the lake, some see it as poetic martyrdom. The Swan Prince dragged down by conformity. Murder, misadventure, the symbolism remains. A gay king silenced, a light extinguished.
But the story doesn't end there.
No. Now we can speak the truth. Celebrate him fully. The sensitive prince dreaming of swan nights is now luminous in the LGBTQ+ historical pantheon, reminding us the right to dream, love, be oneself is worth striving for.
It wasn't a simple fairy tale.
Messy, sad, yes. But it sparkles now with the hope that someday no one needs castles to find a safe space to love.
His story echoes for many.
As we picture him at Neuschwanstein, longing for a love his lifetime couldn't fully offer, we feel the echo of every queer soul feeling alone. His story is universal, in operatic form. Though he fell, his swan song resonates, inspiring new generations to live authentically, express their own castle fantasies openly.
One person's dream, born of longing, can change the world.
Ludwig certainly did. Magnificent castles, enduring music, a legacy proclaiming, live your truth, even if the word calls you mad.
So as you go about your day, maybe think about this. That universal need for belonging, self-expression is just as powerful now. How do we even today build metaphorical, maybe literal, castles to protect our true selves when the world demands conformity?
What does it really mean to be well-adjusted? How much authenticity do we sacrifice?
The enduring power of art, of self-expression, as Ludwig showed us so profoundly, it isn't just survival, it's a revolutionary act.